There are cars that people expect, cars that fit neatly into categories, where every box is ticked and every decision feels safe. And then there are cars that spark arguments, cars that divide families, ignite debates in online forums, and leave even car journalists staring at each other saying, did Skoda really do that? This was one of those cars. The Skoda Kodiaq vRS. A family SUV with performance badge, a machine born out of responsibility, but carrying a name that promised rebellion. From the moment it was revealed, it carried with it a question that still lingers years later. What does performance truly mean? Is it sheer speed? The thunder of an engine? The drama of design? Or is it something quieter, subtler, something more complex? To some, the Kodiaq vRS was brilliance. To others, a mistake. But one thing was certain. It was unforgettable. Its sculpted bonnet lay the truth that divided the world. A 2.0-liter twin-turbocharged diesel engine. On paper, it was perfect, torque-rich, efficient, strong enough to carry families across countries, while still offering a taste of thrill when the road opened up. But numbers cannot change feelings. Enthusiasts turned the key and expected a roar. Instead, they got a hum. They pressed the throttle and expected chaos. Instead, they found discipline. For families, it was brilliant, a surge of torque arriving early, steady and reassuring. Parents thought, this is grown-up performance. This is excitement with responsibility in the backseat. But for others, it was betrayal, a performance badge without theater, a wolf that refused to howl. The heart of the machine was strong, but spoke a language not everyone wanted to hear. Step inside, and the contradictions deepened. Black Alcantara stretched across the seats, stitched with VRS red, like veins through muscle. Ambient lighting glowed softly, painting the cabin in moods that shifted with every journey. It wasn't just an interior. It was a sanctuary. Yet this sanctuary carried reminders, a thicker steering wheel, firmer seats, sharper displays, subtle hints that whispered, don't forget, this is a VRS. On long journeys, children drifted to sleep in the back. Parents leaned into silence, soothed by the hum of diesel efficiency. But when the road cleared, the car responded. Not wild, not brutal, but eager, agile, like a wolf running not for the kill, but simply for the joy of movement, comfort and contradiction, luxury and restraint. A paradox. And it was in that paradox that the Kodiaq vRS became unforgettable. Every car has fans. Every car has critics, but few inspired arguments like this one. Enthusiast forums lit up like wildfire. Some called it brave, others cowardly. One review praised its poise, another dismissed it as a sheep in wolf's clothing. Memes mocked its diesel soundtrack. Headlines debated its very existence. But here's the truth. Cars that fail to stir emotion disappear. The Kodiaq vRS? It never disappeared. Because this wasn't just about a car. It was about identity. About who we are when we drive. Do we cling to the chaos of youth? Or do we evolve, finding thrill and balance in quiet confidence? The Kodiaq vRS wasn't just a car. It was a mirror. Time has a way of changing judgment. Cars once ridiculed often become icons. And the Kodiaq vRS followed that path. People began to remember not the arguments, but the journeys, the way it carried weight without complaint, the balance between sharpness and safety, the fact that it was the first Skoda SUV bold enough to wear the VRS badge, and its diesel heart, once mocked, became a symbol, the last breath before electrification took over, a poetic moment, frozen in time. The Kodiaq vRS was never trying to be a Ferrari, never trying to roar like an AMG or an M Sport. It was trying to be a Skoda. And maybe that was the point. So what was a Kodiaq vRS? A failure? A triumph? A contradiction too bold to ignore? Perhaps it was all of these things. And that's why it mattered. For some, it disappointed. For others, it proved family life did not mean the death of excitement. For many, it was unforgettable because it forced us to ask, what does performance truly mean? Is it speed? Is it noise? Or is it balance? The Kodiaq vRS never gave us an answer. It didn't have to, because it was never just a car. It was a riddle. It was a mirror. And in it, we all saw something different. The Skoda kodiaq vRS, the car that dared to ask and never cared to explain. Every badge carries history, and VRS was no exception. Long before it was etched onto the wide body of an SUV, it had graced rally-bred machines and road cars that whispered of rebellion. Octavia VRS, Fabia VRS, smaller, sharper, hungrier, cars that proved Skoda wasn't just practical, it could be passionate too. And so, when the letters found their way onto the Kodiaq, expectations weren't just high, they were monumental. People expected fire. They expected noise. They expected that same untamed edge. What they got instead was something else. Something quieter. Something steadier. And to some, that felt like betrayal. But others saw it differently. They saw it as evolution. They argued, VRS is not about volume. It's about vision. It's about Skoda daring to stretch the definition of what performance can mean. And in living rooms, in garages, in quiet drives to the countryside, that debate raged on. To truly understand a car, you don't just listen to journalists. You listen to the people who live with it. Owners of the Kodiaq vRS carried a strange kind of pride. At gatherings, they would admit, sometimes with a smile, sometimes defensively, it's not the loudest, but it's ours. They spoke about long journeys where fatigue never arrived, about overtakes that felt effortless, about the way their children leaned back in those red-stitched seats, safe and calm, while they stole a moment of thrill on a winding road. And when critics rolled their eyes, these owners shrugged, because for them, the Kodiaq vRS wasn't about proving anything. It was about living, about finding that fragile balance between family life and individuality, between safety and spark, between the ordinary and the extraordinary. The critics had their words. The owners had their stories. But time was moving, faster than anyone expected. Electrification loomed, casting its shadow over every showroom. Brands scrambled to rethink, to redesign, to reinvent what performance meant. And in that moment, the Kodiaq vRS began to look different. It became not just a car, but a marker, a point in history where diesel was still allowed to dream, where a family SUV could carry the torch of performance without apology. For enthusiasts, it became a reminder of a world slipping away, a world where torque came a growl, where power was fed by fuel, not current. For others, it was a bridge, proof that performance could be responsible, even in an age where responsibility was no longer optional. The Kodiaq vRS wasn't just misunderstood. It was transitional, a car caught between two worlds. And that is why, years later, people still talk about it. Not because it was the fastest, not because it was flawless, but because it left an echo, an aftertaste, a memory that refused to fade. Every time someone asks, what was the point of the Kodiaq vRS? They prove its significance, because cars without meaning are forgotten. And the Kodiaq vRS was never forgotten. It dared to provoke. It dared to contradict. It dared to ask what performance really means in a changing world. And in that question, it became timeless.